His heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord, and furthermore, he took the Asherahs out of the land and the high places. In the third year of his reign, he sent his priests, Benel, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nathaniel, and Benel, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nathaniel, and Micaiah, and with them the Levites, Shemaiah, Azariah, Shemiamoth, Jonathan, Tobijah, Adonijah, Tobijah, and Tobadonijah, and with them the priest Elishama and Joram, and they taught with the book of the law, and having the book of the law with them, they went throughout all the cities of Judah and taught among the people. And the fear of the Lord came upon all the cities around Judah, and they made no war with Jehoshaphat. And some of the Philistines brought tributes for Jehoshaphat, and Siva brought tribute for Jehoshaphat, and bought Jehoshaphat silver, and bought Jehoshaphat's presents and silver for tribute. And some of the Arab brought 7,700 drams and 7,700 dingoes. And Jehoshaphat grew steadily greater. He made the fortresses. And Jehoshaphat grew steadily greater and made the fortresses strong. He built in and made the fortresses strong. And Jehoshaphat grew steadily greater, and he has taught it in the city of Judah. He made the fortresses strong and had soldiers. And he had soldiers. Adna the commander with 300,000. Adna the commander with 300,000 mighty men of valor, and next to him, Joanna the commander with 280,000, and next to him, Amaziah the son of Zikri, a volunteer for the service of the Lord, with 200,000 mighty men of valor. And of Benjamin, Eliada, a mighty man of valor, with 200,000 mighty men of valor. And next to him, Joshabad, with 180,000 men armed for war. These were in the service of the king, beside those whom the king placed in the fortified city, and with the chariots in Jerusalem. Chapter 18. Now Jehoshaphat had great riches and honor. And made a marriage and last with Ahab. After some years, he went down to Ahab in Samaria, and Ahab killed him and people, and this go to Ramoth Gilead. And Ahab the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat king of Judah, will you go to Ramoth Gilead? And he said, I will go. My people as a people. I will go with my people as a people. I am as you are. My people as a people will be with you in war. Then and Joshua said to the king of Israel, inquire first for the word of the Lord. And the king of Israel gathered the prophet together, 400 men, and said to them, Shall we go to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall I forbear? And they said, Go, for the Lord will give it into the hand. Go, for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king. And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, Is there not yet another prophet of the Lord of whom we may inquire? And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is yet another man of whom we inquire of the Lord. His name is Micaiah the son of Imlah, but I hate him, for he never prophesied good concerning me, but always evil. And Jehoshaphat said to the king, let not the king say so. And the king summoned an officer and said, "Bring quickly Micaiah the son of Imla. Bring quickly Micaiah the son of Imla." And Jehoshaphat and the king of Israel were sitting on their throne, arrayed in their robes. They were sitting at the entrance of the gate. They were sitting at the threshold of the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah the son of Shenaniah made for himself horns of iron and said, "With this he shall put the sirens until they are destroyed. With this you shall put the sirens until they are destroyed." And all the prophets prophesied. And all the prophets prophesied so. And all the prophets prophesied so. And all the prophets prophesied so. And they said, "Go up and triumph. Go up to Ramoth Gilead and triumph, for the Lord will give it to the hand of the king." And the messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to him, "The word of the prophet with one accord are favorable to the king." The word of the prophet with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like one of them, and speak favorably. And Micaiah said to him, "What my as the Lord lives, what my God says, I will speak. What my God says, I will speak. What my God says, I will speak."
Which Moses, the servant of the Lord,
What my God
made
says, I will
this
speak.
was here. Verse 4 says, "But David had brought up the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim to the place which David had prepared for it, for he had pitched a tent for it in Jerusalem." Verse 5 says, "Moreover, the bronze altar that Bezalel, the son of Uri, son of Hur, had made, was there before the tabernacle of the Lord, and Solomon and the assembly with him sought the Lord." Verse 6 says, "And Solomon and all the assembly with him went to the high place at Gibeon for the tent of meeting of God, and offered 1,000 burnt offerings upon it." Verse 7 says, "In that night God appeared to Solomon and said to him, Ask what I shall give you." Verse 8 says, "Before these people, for who can rule these thy people that is so great?" Verse 11 says, "God answered Solomon and said to him, Because this was in your heart, and you have not asked wealth, possessions, honor, and have not asked." Verse 10 says, "Give me now wisdom and knowledge, that I may go out and come in before these people. For who can rule these thy people that is so great?" Verse 11 says, God answered Solomon, "Because this was in your heart, and you have not asked possessions, wealth, honor, or the life of those who hate you, and have not asked long life, but have asked wisdom and knowledge, that you may rule over these people whom I have made you king." Verse 12 says, "Wisdom and knowledge are granted to you. I will also give you riches, possessions, wealth, honor, such as none of the kings had who were before you, and none after you shall have the like." Verse 13 says, "So Solomon came from the high place that was at Gibeon, from before the tent of meeting to Jerusalem, and he reigned over Israel." Verse 14 says, "And the king gathered together chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horses, whom he stationed in the chariot cities, and with the king in Jerusalem." Verse 15 says, "And the king made gold and silver as common in Jerusalem as stone, and cedar as plentiful as the sycamore of Shepherah." Verse 16 says, "And Solomon's import of horses was from Egypt and Kue, and the king's traders received them from Kue for a price." Verse 17 says, They imported a chariot for a Verse 17 says, "They imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. Likewise, through them, these were exported to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Syria." Chapter 2, verse 1 says, "Now Solomon proposed in his heart to build a temple for the name of the Lord, and a royal palace for himself." Verse 2 says, He assigned 70,000 men to bear burdens, and 80,000 to quarry in the hill country, and 3,600 to oversee them. Verse 3 says, and Solomon sent word to Huram, the king of Tyre, as you dealt with David my father, and sent him cedar to build himself a house to dwell in, so deal with me. Verse 4 says, for I am about to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, and to dedicate it to him for the burning of incense, of sweet spices, and for the continual offering of the showbread, and for burnt offerings morning and evening. Morning and evening, on the Sabbath and the new moons, and the appointed feasts of the Lord, as ordained, and the appointed feasts of the Lord our God, as ordained forever for Israel. Verse 5 says, the house which I am about to build will be great and wonderful, for our God is greater than all gods. Verse 5 says, the house which I am about to build will be great, for our God is greater than all gods. Verse 6 says, but who is able to build him a house? Who am I to build him a house? Verse 6 says, but who is able to build him a house? Since heaven, even highest heaven, cannot contain him. Who am I to build him a house, except as a place to burn incense before him? Verse 7 says, so now send me a man skilled to work in gold, silver, send me also, verse 8 says, send me also cedar, cypress, and algum timber from Lebanon. For I know that your servants know how to cut timber in Lebanon. Verse 9 says, to prepare for me timber in abundance, for the house which I am about to build will be great and wonderful. Verse 10 says, I will give for your servants, the hewers who cut timber, 20,000 cors of crushed wheat, 20,000 cors of barley, 20,000 baths of wine, and 20,000 baths of oil. Verse 11 says, Huram answered in a letter which he sent to Solomon, because the Lord loves his people, he has made you king over them. Verse 12 says, Huram also said, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who made heaven and earth, who has given King David a wise son, endued with discretion and understanding, who will build a house for the name of the Lord his God, and a royal palace for himself. Verse 13 says, who built verse 13 says, verse 11 says, Huram answered in a letter which he sent to Solomon, because the Lord loves his people, he has made you king over them, that you may execute. He has made you king over them, that you may execute justice. Verse 12 says, Huram also said, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who made heaven and earth, who had given
and thou hast given and given to your enemy, and thou hast taken away captives the land power. Yet if the least you are in the land of the captivity, and if the least you are in the land of their captivity, and repent and pray and make supplication, saying, we have sinned, we have acted previously and wickedly. If they repent, restore their mind and restore their heart, and pray, the land that gives to their father, to the city that was cheap, to the house shall build for thy name. Though thou hear from me and forgive, and thou forgive their
that may be assigned him with the craftsmen, with your craftsmen, the craftsmen of my Lord, David your father. Verse 15 says, so now, the wheat and barley, oil and wine, of which my Lord the king has spoken, let him send to his servants, and we will cut whatever timber you need from Lebanon. Verse 16 says, and send it to you in rafts by sea to Joppa, that you may take it up to Jerusalem. Verse 17 says, then Solomon took a census of all the aliens who were in the land of Israel, after the census of them which David his father had taken, and there were found 153,600 of them. 153,600. Verse 18 says, 70,000 of them he assigned to bear burdens, 80,000 to quarry in the hill country, and 3,600 as overseers to make the people work. Chapter 3 verse 1 says, Solomon began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to David his father, on the place that David had appointed in the threshing floor of On and the Jebusites. Verse 2 says, he began to build in the 2nd month of the 4th year of his reign. Verse 3 says, these are Solomon's measurements for building the house of God. The length in cubits of the old standard was 60 cubits, and the breadth was 20 cubits. Verse 4 says, the vestibule in front of the nave of the house was 120 cubits. Verse 4 says, the vestibule in front of the nave of the house was 20 cubits, equal to the width of the house, and the width was 20 cubits. Verse 5 says, the nave he lined with cypress and covered it with pure gold and made palms and chains on it. Verse 6 says, he also made 10 tables in which to wash, and placed 5 on the south side of the house, and placed 5 on the south side. Verse 6 says, he also made 10 tables in which to wash, and set them in the temple, and placed 5 on the south side and 5 on the north side. In these they were to rinse off what was used for the burnt offering, and the sea was for the priests to wash in. Verse 7 says, and he made 10 golden lampstands, as prescribed, and placed 5 on the south side and 5 on the north side. Verse 8 says, and he made 10 tables, and set 5 on the south side and 5 on the north side, and he made 100 basins of gold. Verse 9 says, so he made the courts of the priests, and the great courts, and the doors for the courts, and overlaid their doors with bronze. Verse 10 says, in the most holy place, verse 10 says, and he made the most holy place, its length corresponding to the breadth of the house. Verse 10 says, in the most holy place, he made 2 cherubims of wood, and overlaid them with gold. Verse 11 says, the wings of these cherubims together extended 20 cubits. One wing of 5 cubits touched the wall of the house, and its other wing of 5 cubits touched the wall of the other cherub. Verse 12 says, and of this cherub, one wing of 5 cubits touched the wall of the house, and its other wing of 5 cubits was joined to the wing of the first cherub. Verse 13 says, the wings of this cherubim extended 20 cubits, and the cherubim stood on their feet facing the nave. Verse 14 says, in front of the house, he made 2. Verse 14 says, he made the veil of blue, purple, crimson fabrics, and fine lining, and worked cherubims on it. Verse 15 says, in front of the house, he made 2 pillars, 35 cubits high, and a capital of 5 cubits. 35 cubits high, and a capital of 5 cubits on the top of the pillars. Verse 16 says, he made chains like a necklace, and put them on the top of the pillars. And he made 100 pomegranates, and put them on the top of the chains. Verse 17 says, and put them on the top of the chains. Verse 17 says, he set the pillars in front of the temple, one on the south side and the other on the north. That on the south he called Jachin, and that on the north. Chapter 4 verse 1 says, Solomon made an altar of bronze, 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 10 cubits high. Verse 2 says, then he made the mountain seat, which was round, 10 cubits from brim to brim, and 5 cubits high, and a line of 30 cubits measured its circumference. Verse 3 says, under it were figures of gods, the gods, compassing the sea round about. The gods were in 2 rows. Cast. Verse 3 says, under it were figures of gods for 30 cubits, compassing the sea round about. The gods were in 2 rows, cast with it when it was cast. Verse 4 says, it stood upon 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing south, 3 facing west. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. Verse 5 says, its thickness was like a handbreadth, like the brim of a cup, like the flower of a lily. It held over 3,000 baths. Verse 6 says, verse 6 says, so he made. Verse 6 says, he lined the house with settings of precious stones. The gold was gold of paving. Verse 7 says, verse 6 says, he adorned the house with settings of precious stones. The gold was gold of paving. Verse 7 says, he lined the house with gold. Its threshold, its beams, its threshold, its walls, and its doors. And he carved cherubims on the walls. Verse 8 says, in the most holy place, and he carved cherubims on the walls. Verse 5 says, verse 8.
As come holy. Then Solomon offered up one offering before the Lord in the altar of Joshua before the vessel, as the duty of each day required. Offering according to the commandment of God for the Sabbath, the new moon, and the 3 Advent feast, the feast of the new bread, feast of the weeks, feast of the tabernacle, according to the ordinances of David, his father. He appointed the division of the priests for their service and the Levites for their office of praise and ministry before the priest and the duty of each day required. And the 8 members in their division for several days. For so David, the man of the Lord, has commanded them. And they did not turn aside for what Solomon, and they did not turn aside, for what Solomon has commanded the priest and the Levite concerning any matter and concerning all children. Thus was accomplished the work which thus was accomplished the work. Thus was accomplished the work of Solomon. For the day the foundation of
was gold of paving. Verse 7 says, verse 7 says, so he lined the house with gold, its beams, its threshold, its walls, and its doors, and he carved cherubims on the walls. Verse 8 says, and he carved cherubims on the walls. Verse 8 says, and he carved cherubims on the walls. Verse 9 says, verse 9 says, the weight of the nail was 1 shekel to 50 shekels of gold. Verse 10 says, verse 10 says, and he made the things that were, verse 10 says, and he made the pots, the shovels. Verse 10 says, he set the sea at the southeast corner of the house. Verse 11 says, so Huram finished the work that he did for King Solomon on the house of the Lord. Verse 11 says, Huram also made the pots, the shovels, and all the equipment. For this Huram Abi made of burnished bronze. Verse 12 says, the two capitals, the 2 pillars, and the two bowls of capitals that were upon the pillars.
For a long time, it's not that tree board, without ship and without law. As it's forced here. Yes. But even their dishes. But when they are dishes, they talk to the Lord said, and something, it was found by them. That's why I said, in those times, there was one person in water, or to him came for great resources, afflicted all their thoughts from the ground. Let's say, they were broken pieces, nation against nation, as stay against it. For God troubled them with every sort of distress. Let's say something, but you take courage, no let your he took courage and put together their body for all the man of Judah and Benjamin, and from 6 we shall take new country of Israel, and he begged the altar of God, and we fought the best of the house of the Lord. Let's not say, and gathered Judah and Benjamin, and those from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, who were so long with them, for going to battle decided to him from Israel, when they saw that the Lord's sword was with him. Let's see, it says, they were assembled in the house of the Lord in the 3rd month of the 5th year of the reign of Asa. In terms of the 15th year of the reign of Asa, they shall pass the Lord on that day on the spoil which they had bought, 700 oxen and 7,000 sheep. silver and vessels. This is gold, silver, and vessels. And there was no more war until the 50th year of Asa. See this one says, verse 1, the 30th year of Asa, back to the Lord against Judah and took someone. I feel like I'm not going to want to come to Asa, king of Judah. Verse 2 says, then Asa took silver and gold from the house of the Lord and the prince and sent them to Behind king of Syria, who does in the house, saying, that this is, let there be any king and my father and your father. Behold, I am saying to you, silver and gold, go, break all the Baasha king of Israel, that may be brought from you. As I said, and when Baasha heard, and behind the attack to Ungasa, and send the commander against the city of Israel, and the conquer Idol down, upon my head, and the sources of Naphtali. And the sources of Naphtali, I say, and when Baasha heard of it, he stopped beating Ramah and let his bones cease. Verse 6 says, then Asa took all Judah and carried his bones of Ramah and his timber, which Baasha had given, and with them he built Geba and Mizpah. Verse 7 says, at that time, Hiram came to Asa and said to him, because he now the Lord of God, and because he now the king of Syria, I know now the Lord of God, the army of the king of Syria have escaped you. Verse 18, when all the Ethiopians and leaders, they will shall does he mention our last name? Then because he now the Lord, he gave them to your hand. Verse 19, but the eyes of the Lord watch out for throughout the world to show his might in behalf of those whose hearts blameless towards him. Because you have done finishing this from now on you have word. Verse 20, then Asa was angry with Syria and put him in the store in prison, but was in with him because of this. And Asa extended for it to Bosman at the same time. At the same time. Verse 11 says, in the 39th year, verse 11 says, the acts of Asa, the first of that, are written in the book of the king of Israel, of Judah and Israel. Verse 12 says, in the 39th year of his reign, Asa was deceived in his feet, and his disease became severe. Yet even with disease, he did not seek the Lord, but sought help from physicians. Verse 13 says, and Asa said to his father, die in the first year of Israel. Verse 14 says, the boy which shall rule for himself, the city of David, the living of the man, which shall be filled with various kinds of spices, which shall be filled with various kinds of spices, which shall be filled with various kinds of spices. The living of the man, which shall be filled with various kinds of spices, and they made a very great fire in his honor. So verse 14, just what the son reigned in his stead, and strengthened himself against his head, but he placed us slaves for vices of Judah, and set garrisons around Judah. Verse 2 says, and the sister of Ephraim, which Asa's father had taken. Verse 3 says, you know what the thing, because he walked in the area of his father, and he did not seek the bar. Verse 4 says, but sought the God of his father, and walked in his commandment, and not according to the of Israel. Verse 5 says, therefore the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah paid tribute to Jehoshaphat, and he had great riches and honor. Verse 6, and he had great riches and honor. Verse 6, his heart was not for us in the Lord, and from among he took the high places and Asher out of Judah. Verse 7 says, in the 10th year of Israel, he set his priests Ben, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nathaniel, and Micaiah to teach him the of Judah. Verse 8 says, of Judah, and with them the Levites, Shemaiah, Nethaniah, Zebadiah, Asaiah, Shemaiah, Jehonathan, Adonijah, Tobijah, and with these Levites, the priests, Elishama and Jeroboam. Verse 9 says, and so to Judah, having the book of the Lord, then they went about all the cities and taught among the people. And the fear of the Lord fell upon all the kingdoms of the lands and about Judah, and they made known what they did to Jehoshaphat. Verse 10 says, who had feasting for the Jehoshaphat present? Who had brought the Jehoshaphat present? And Arab and silver for tribute. And the Arab also brought him 7,700 rams and 7,700. Verse 12, and Jehoshaphat grew steadily in Judah. He put in Judah, and Jehoshaphat grew steadily in Judah. He put in Judah fortresses and tall cities. He had great stores, the cities of Judah. He had soldiers, mighty men of valor in Jerusalem. He had soldiers, mighty men of valor in Jerusalem. Verse 14 says, in Jerusalem, verse 14 says, this was what happened by fathers' houses. Of Judah, the commanders of 1,000, Adna, the commander, 300,000 mighty men of valor. Verse 15 says, and next to him, Jehoshaphat, the commander, with 280,000 men. Verse 16 says, and next to him, Amaziah, the son of Zishi, a volunteer for the service of the Lord. With 200,000 mighty men of valor. Verse 17 says, of Benjamin, Eliada, a mighty man of valor, with 200,000 men, armed bow and shield. 200,000 men, armed bow and shield. Verse 18 says, and next to him, Jehoshaphat, the commander, with 180,000 armed for war. As I say, this was the service of the king, besides those who the king had placed in 45 cities. Throughout, this king had placed in 45 cities. So I told Judah. It's the person. But there's not had great riches upon him, and made the money like that to them. Let's just say, after some years, he went down to Air and Samaria, and Air killed and brought us sheep and oxen for him. I'm going to put down with him and conduce him to go against them again. And this is what they are. Let's say, Air, king of Israel, said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, will you go into Ramoth Gilead? He answered him, I am a spot, a pastor of people. Who built you your wall? Let's not say, he said, inquire first, then what's the good of them? Inquire first for the word of the Lord. Inquire first for the word of the Lord. As his father says, and the king of Israel, gathered prophets together, 400 men, and said to them, shall we go to battle? Shall we go to battle against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I stay here? And they said, go to Ramoth Gilead and triumph. For God will give it to you. For God will give it to the hand of the king. For God will give it to the hand of the king. God will give it to the hand of the king. Yes, he said, but those who say, is there not yet an appointment of the Lord? Like of whom we inquire. Yes, some says, and king of Israel Jehoshaphat. There is just one man by whom we inquire of the Lord. There's no one by whom we inquire of the Lord. But my car is on me now. But I ate him. For the one who said concerning me, always eat. And the Lord said, let not the king say so. Yes, he said, then the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, bring quickly, my car is on me now. And I said, now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, was sitting in their truth. I read in their rooms, and they were sitting at the threshing floor. And they sitting at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were signed before them. Verse 10 says, and Zedekiah king of Judah made for himself one of iron, and said, with this, I said, thus said the Lord, this shall be the secret unto their destroyed. Verse 11 says, and the messenger who went to summon Micaiah, and the messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to me, behold, he was a prophet, it's one I called, favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably. So be like word of you, and speak favorably. Verse 11 says, all the people prophesied so, and said, go up and triumph. The Lord will give you to the hand of the king. Verse 12 says, and the messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to me, behold, the word of the prophet is one I called, and favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably. Verse 13 says, but Micaiah said to me, as the Lord is, what my God says, that I speak. Verse 14 says, and when they are come to the king said to me, Micaiah, shall we go to battle to Ramoth Gilead, or shall I forbear? Or shall I forbear? And he said, go up and triumph. They will give into your hand. They will give into your hand. But the king said to me, how many times shall I have joined that to me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? Verse 16 says, and he said, I see one is scattered upon the mountain, as thou must be. And the Lord said, this have no master. Let it should go to his own peace. Let's do them to his own peace. Verse 17 says, and who will say this part? They have not said that no one is going to tell him, but him. Verse 18 says, and Micaiah said, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting upon his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing on his right and on his left. On his right hand and on his left. Verse 19 says, and the Lord said, who entice here, that he may go up and fall as from Gilead. And one said one thing, and another said another. And another said another. Verse 20 says, and one said one thing, and another said another. Verse 20 says, and then the Spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to me, that what means? Verse 1 says, and he said, I will go forth and be an spirit in the mouth of all these prophets. And he said, go forth. And he said, you have to entice him and shall succeed. Go forth and do so. Verse 22 says, now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a mind lying spirit in the mouth of these your prophets. The mouth of these your prophets. The mouth of the Lord, now therefore, it's a lying spirit in the mouth of these your prophets. The Lord has put this concerning me. Verse 23 says, there is a guy John Shariana, struck my car sheep, and said, which way the Spirit of the Lord go for me to speak to you? Which way the Spirit of the Lord go for me to speak to you? And he said, verse 25. Verse 24 says, and Micaiah said to him, you shall see on that day when you go into the national bank to hide yourself. Verse 25 says, and the king of Israel said, verse 25 says, and the king of Israel said, seize Micaiah and take him back to Ammon governor and to Joash the king's son. Verse 26 says, and say, don't set the king, put this fellow in prison and feed him his scanty of bread and water and return the peace. Verse 27 says, and Micaiah said, if you return the peace, the Lord allows to go to me. And he said, yeah, all you people. Verse 28 says, so the king of Israel just for king of Judah went up of Ramoth Gilead. Verse 29 says, and the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and go to battle, but you, what are you? So the king of Israel disguised himself, and they went into battle. And they went into battle. Verse 29 says, now the king of Syria had married a child. 5 people the king. Verse 1 says, and when he captured the child, for shame. So back for shame. Verse 3 says, but the second man drew back to measure and struck the king of Israel between the scale armor. Drew back to measure and struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. Between the scale armor and the breastplate. And therefore, he said to Jehovah the Lord, turn about and carry out the battle, for I am wounded. Verse 4 says, and the battle moved not that day, and the king of Israel caught himself up in the chariot, facing the sea of evening, then at sunset he died. 19 verse 1 says, Jehoshaphat king of Judah returned his face to his house to the verse 2 says, but King of Israel and said unto Jehoshaphat, should you not be wicked and make us wait the Lord? Because of this, what has gone out against the Lord? Verse 3 says, nevertheless, some good is found in you. Nevertheless, some good is found in you, for you destroyed the Asherah out of the land, and have set your heart to see God. Verse 4 says, Jehoshaphat those that they said, I want to get among the people from Bathsheba to the people of Ife, and brought them back to the God, the God of their fathers. Verse 5 says, they appointed judges. I said, they appointed judges in all the land of Judah. They appointed judges in all the land of Judah, city by city. City by city. Verse 6 says, and said to them, consider what to do, for it does not for the Lord, you too give him them. Verse 7 says, now then, let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Take it for what to do, take it what to do, for there's no correction of justice. For there's no correction of justice with Lord our God, or partiality, or taking bribes. Verse 8 says, Jehoshaphat, moreover in Jerusalem, he appointed certain Levites and priests, like the family of Israel, to give judgment for the Lord and to decide disputed cases. And he shall them, such you shall do in the fear of the Lord and with your whole heart. In the fear of the Lord and with faithfulness and with your whole heart. Verse 10 says, whoever comes to you with a case from your brethren who live in their cities concerning bloodshed, law or commandments, statute or ordinance, then you shall restore them, and they will go before the Lord, and wrath will not come upon you and your brethren. Such you shall do, and nothing. Such you shall do, and nothing judgment. Verse 11 says, and my right sheep is over you, all matters of the Lord, and Zebediah the son of Ishmael, governor of the house of Judah, all these matters. Deep well, you know the king's master, and never be servant officers. Deep courage, and may the Lord be the upright. 20 verse 1 says, after the Moabites, Ammonites, and with them for the midnight, came against the of the battle. As you say, so many king of Jehoshaphat, you against countries formed against you, from Edom, from beyond the sea, and beyond the Hazaz of Tamar. That's against you. As he still says, they don't fast here, and set himself to seek the Lord, and proclaim a fast of Judah. Verse 4 says, and Judah assembled to seek the Lord. All the cities of Judah, they came to seek the Lord. Verse 5 says, they came to seek the Lord. Verse 5 says, and Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem, in the house of the Lord, before the new court. Verse 6, and said, O Lord, art thou not, O Lord, God of art thou not God in heaven? Dost thou not rule over the kingdoms of the country? In thy hand are power and might, so that no one is able to withstand you. Verse 7 says, did thou not our God, Jehovah the architect of this land, before thy people say, and keep it forever to the descendants of Abraham thy friend? Verse 8 says, and they have done things, and have built things in sanctuary for thy name, saying, that some people will come upon us, if there's pestilence, if it comes upon us, there's sword, judgment, or pestilence, or famine. We will stand before this house and before thy name, for thy name is this house. I will cry to thee in our affliction, and thou wilt hear and see it. Verse 10 and thou behold, the men of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, if thou will not let Israel, when they came from the land of Egypt, and when they are boarded and did not destroy. Verse 11 behold, the waters that come to drive us after their possession. I come to drive us after their possession, which thou giving thy people to inherit. Which thou giving thy people to inherit. Verse 12 says, oh our God, we don't let every judgment upon them. For our parents against those ones, we no longer want our eyes upon you. Verse 13 says, meanwhile, all the men of Judah stood before them, their little ones, their wives, and their children. Verse 14 says, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jahaziel, the son of Zechariah, son of Benaiah, son of Mattaniah, a Levite of the son of Benaiah, son of Mattaniah, and the Levite of the sons of Ar, in the midst of the people. Verse 15 says, and he said, hear me, O Judah, O Judah, and I of Jerusalem, and just fast. Thus said the Lord to you, fear not, thus the Lord to you, fear not, and be not dismayed, for it is not yours, but you find my east of the wilderness of Joel. Verse 17, Praise head to the ground. And all Judah and Jerusalem fell before the Lord, worshiping the Lord. Verses 19 says, and the Levites of Korah and Korahites stood up to praise the Lord God of Israel with a very loud voice. Verse 20 says, and early morning, and when came to Tekoa, and as he went out, those fast stood up, praising the Lord of God and he was established, praising prophets and his success. Verses 21 says, and when they are taking counsel with the people, he appointed those who were to sing to the Lord and to praise him in their name, and went before the army and saying, give thanks to God for his steadfast love and just forever. Verse 22 says, and when they began to sing and praise, the Lord set an ambush against the Ammon, Moab, and said, so that they who are coming against Judah, so that they will beat them. Verse 23 says, for the men of Ammon and Moab rose up against the altars of Seir, destroying them utterly. I want destroying them utterly. I want them made an end of the altars of Seir. I want them made an end of the altars of Seir. They all had to destroy one another. Verse 24 says, when the men of Judah came to the watchtower, they looked toward the most street, and behold, they were dead and buried in the ground. None had escaped. Verse 25 says, what the other man is hoping to change the day, he found captain with his mother, and goods, and precious stones, and goods. He found captain with his mother, and goods, and clothing, and precious things for himself, until they could carry no more. This is what he said, until they could carry no more. They were 3 days in taking his word for so much. That's what he said. On the 4th day, they are by the valley of Beraka, for there they bless the Lord. For there they bless the Lord. Therefore, no other place has called the valley of Beraka. Verse 27 says, then they will talk to Jerusalem. Then they will talk to Jerusalem. Everyone. Then they will turn. Everyone of Judah and Jerusalem, and just pass at their head. Return to Jerusalem. Joy. For the Lord has made them just father. For the Lord has made them just father enemies. Verse 28 says, they will talk to Jerusalem. They came to Jerusalem with cymbals, harps, and lyres to the house of the Lord. Verse 29 says, and fear of God came upon all the kingdoms of the country. When they heard that the Lord had fought against the enemies of Israel. Verse 29 says, so the Lord of God was quiet. And so the Lord of God was quiet, for his God gave him peace on his mind. His God gave him peace. Verse 31 says, thus Joseph reigned over Judah. He was 25 years when he began reigning. And he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Sheba. Verse 32 says, and he walked in ways of Asa, his father, and not aside from it. He did what God desired of the Lord. Verse 33 says, the ark is fire by not away. People are not yet set their hearts to seek the God of their fathers. People are not set their hearts to call the God of their father. Verse 34 says, now the rest of the ark of God's man, confess that I written the chronicles of Judah. I written the chronicles of Judah, which are recorded in the books of the kings of Judah, which are in the books of the kings of Israel. Verse 34 says, after this, Jehoshaphat, king of Israel, king of Judah, joined with Isaiah, king of Israel, who did begin. Verse 35 says, he joined him in building ships to go to Shasha, and they built ships as on the bar. Verse 37 says, then Alexa the son of Todaba of Maesha, who was assigned against Jehoshaphat, saying, because I joined with Isaiah, no one sure what I'm doing. And this ship of them, I was not going to go to Shasha. 24 verse 1 says, verse 1, so Jehoshaphat set his fathers on going to find a sister of him. And Jehoram his son made him said, verse 2, he had brothers, the sons of Jehoshaphat, Azariah, Jael, Zechariah, Azariah, Michael, and Shephatiah. Also the sons of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Verse 3 says, the father then went into Sheba and gold and valuable possessions, together with the first in Judah. But the kingdom began to Jehoram, was his eldest son. The son said, when Jehoram had ascended the throne of his father, I was a father. He swore the brother of his sword. I also summoned the peace of Israel. Verse 5 says, Jehoram was 30 years old and made 8 years in Jerusalem. And he made 8 years in Jerusalem. Verse 6 says, and made 8 years in Jerusalem. Verse 6 says, he walked in the ways of the king of Israel, for the daughter of Ahab was like, he was evil in the sight of the Lord. Verse 7 says, he was evil in the sight of the Lord. Verse 7 says, verse 7 says, and he was evil in the sight of the Lord. Verse 7 says, yes, the Lord never because of the promise which he had made, and since he had promised, because of the covenant which he had made, and since he had to give a land to him and to his sons forever. Verse 8 says, in his days, everyone voted for the will of God. made like this in the new country of Judah, and led the house of Israel into faithfulness, and made Judah to actually. As his 12 says, and the letter came to him from the letter of the prophet, saying, because I have not walked in the ways of Asa. Thus says the Lord, the God of David your father, because I have not walked in the ways of Joseph my father, or in the ways of Asa king of Judah. The ways of Asa king of Judah. Verse 13 says, but I have walked. Verse 13 says, but I have walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, and led Judah and the house of Israel into faithfulness, and the house of Israel led Israel into faithfulness, and you have changed your rulers of your father's house, who were better than yourselves. Verse 14 says, behold, the Lord will bring a great plague upon your wives, or your children, your wives, and all your possessions. Verse 16, and you yourself have a severe sickness till the disease of the boys, until your boys come out day by day because of this. Verse 16, and the Lord stood up against Jeroboam and got the places, and there are who are near believers. Verse 17 says, and they came up against Judah and invaded them and carried away all the possessions they found that belonged to the king's house, and also his sons and his wives, and also his sons and his wives. So I'm not sure get to him except Jehovah. Except Jehovah, his youngest son. Except Jehovah, his youngest son. Verse 18 says, except Jehovah, his youngest son. Verse 18 says, because of time at the end of the year, he's come and he broke out because of disease and he died in the factory. His mom made no fear in his honor. I felt for his father. Verse 20 says, you have to Jesus one country, and he hated in Jerusalem, and he departed with no one to get. They brought him to teach of him, but not to the truth of the kings. So into the country, this man said, and I went to Jerusalem, made as I get for king, he said, but the part of men are asleep up with that son. And so Isaiah, son of Joram, king of Judah, reigned. Verse 2 says, Isaiah was for 2 years when he passed away, and he made 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azariah, one of Verse 3 says, he did what was given in his sight. Verse 3 says, he did what was given in his sight, but his mother was counselor. But his mother was counselor. Verse 4 says, he did the kings of Israel. After the death of his father, they were his counselors. Verse 5, he followed their counsel and went to Azariah. I went to Jehoram, son of Ahab, son of Ahab, to battle to fight against Azariah, king of Syria, at Ramoth Gilead. And the Syrians wounded Joram. Verse 6 says, and he returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which he had received at Ramah, when fighting Azariah, king of Syria. And Azariah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to meet Joram, son of Ahab, in Jezreel. Verse 7 says, also, ordained by God, like that of Azariah shall come. About who is going to visit Joram. When he came there, he went out to Joram to meet Joram, son of Rishi, whom the Lord had anointed to destroy the house of Ahab. Verse 9 says, and when he was visiting Joram, when the house of Ahab, he met with the priests of Judah and the sons of Azariah brother, who attended Azariah, and he killed them. Verse 9 says, he shed for Azariah, and he was captured by eyes of Ahab, and was brought to June and put to death. They buried him for the sake. He's the grandson of Joshua, who saw the Lord, who saw the Lord to his house. Who saw the Lord to his house, and the house of Azariah had no one able to meet the kingdom. Verse 10 says, now when Azariah, the mother of Azariah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family of the house of Judah. Verse 6, and saw the royal family of the house of Judah. Verse 11 says, but Joshua, the daughter of the king, took Joab, son of Azariah, from among the kings, and stole him away from among the kings of who were about to be slain, and she put him and his nurse in a chamber. And she put him and his nurse and from among the kings who were about to be slain, and she put him and his nurse in a bedchamber. Thus, Jehoshaphat, the daughter of Jehoram, and wife of Jehoiada the priest, also the sister of Azariah, hid from Azariah, so that she would not slay him. Verse 20, and he made 6 years, he in the house of God, while Azariah reigned by the land. 23 verse 1 says, but in 7th year, Jehoiada took courage and entered into the compact, the commanders of thousands, the commanders of 100, Azariah the son of Jehoram, Ishmael son of Jehoram, Azariah son of Obed, Elishaphat, Masiah son of Adaiah, and Elishaphat. And the ones about Judah, and they had got the Levites, and they had the Levites among the cities of Judah, and the head of fathers of Israel, and they came to Jerusalem. Verse 3 says, how does it make the covenant of the king? And Jehoiada said to them, behold the king's son, let the gatekeepers. Verses 4 says, and one said, shall be gatekeepers. Verse 5 says, and one shall be at the king's house, and one said, at the gate of the foundation. Foundation, and gate of the foundation. And all the people shall be in the court of the house of the Lord. Verse 6 says, let no one enter the house of the Lord, except the priests and ministry Levites. They may enter for their holy. They may enter for their holy. All the people shall keep the tradition of the Lord. All the people shall keep the tradition. All the people shall keep the tradition of the Lord. Verse 17 says, Levi shall surround the king, each his weapon in his hand. In his hand. And anyone wanted the house of the Lord is to be slain. Be with the king when he comes in and when he goes out. Verse 8 says, Levites and all Judah, this is according to all that Jehovah the priest commanded. They each brought his men who were to come on duty on the Sabbath, with those who were to come on duty on the Sabbath. With those who were to come on duty on the Sabbath. For the other priests did not dismiss their divisions. Except and the other priests divided the captains. And the other priests divided the captains. Then they speared, and the last of one sheep that were in David, who showed in the house of God. Who showed in the house of God. Who showed in the house of God. Verse 10 says, and he said to the people, as God for the king, from the south side of the house, to the north side of the house, around the altar and the house. Around the altar and the house. Verse 11 says, then he brought out the king's son and put the crown upon him. And put the crown. Then he brought out the king's son and put the crown. And put the crown upon him and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king. And gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king. And they proclaimed him king. And the other wrestlers anointed him. And they said, long live the king. Verse 12 says, as I heard the people running and praising the king, she went to the house of the Lord. Verse 13 says, and when she, there was a king standing by the pillar, and the captain and interpreter said, all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpet, and singing and musicalizing, leading in celebration. Leading in celebration. Then the other priest brought out the captain who was just over the army, saying to them, bring out our king in hands. Bring out our king in hands. Anyone who follows her is to be slain with the sword. Anyone who follows her is to be slain with the sword. For the priest said, do not slay her in the house of the Lord. Verse 15 says, so he laid it on her, and she went to the entrance of the first gate of the king's house, and they slew her there. Verse 16 says, and the one that made a covenant between himself and all the people and the king, that they should be the Lord's people. Verse 17 says, all the people went to the house of Baal and tore it down. To the house of Baal and tore it down. And his altar and image, they broke in pieces. They broke in pieces, and they slew out the priests of Baal for the altars. And the other apostle was meant for the house of the Lord, under the direction of the Levitical priests and the Levites, whom David had organized to be in charge of the house of the Lord, and to offer burnt to the house of the Lord, according to the law of Moses, with rejoicing and with singing, according to the honor of David. Verse 19 says, he stationed the gatekeepers in the gates of the house of the Lord, so that no one should enter who was an enemy unclean. Verses 20 says, and out of land, and he brought the king down to the house of the Lord. Rejoice. And Jonah said, all the people of the land rejoice, and so the people of the land rejoice, and the city was quiet after Adoniah had slain the sword. 24 verse 1. So the king commanded, and they made a chest, and set it outside the gate of the king's house. Verse 13, and preparation was made throughout Judah and Jerusalem to bring it for the Lord, the tax, let me buy the tax. Much more units. When you saw there was much more units, the king secretary and the chief officer and the officer of the ship is come and empty it and take it and turn it to this place. So just the DJ after they and collected the money in their orders. Excellent say, and they brought the money before the king and Jehovah. No, and the king and Jehovah gave the money to those who were charged of the work of the house of the Lord, and they hired masses, carpenter to restore the house of the Lord, and also workers in iron and bronze to repair the house of the Lord. Verse 30 says, to those who engage, verse 30 says, to those who engage in work, labor, and repairing went forward in their hands, and they restored the house of the Lord to its proper condition and strengthened it. Verse 14 says, and they brought the rest of the money before the king and Jehoiada, and with his militants for the house of the Lord, both for the service and the boss office, and for the chief for incense, and 5 house of pure gold, and they offered unto the house of the Lord continually all the days of Jehoiada. All the days of Jehoiada. Verse 15 says, now Jehoiada grew old and full of days, and died, was 130 years old at his death. Verse 16 says, and he buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel, and towards God and his house. Verse 17 says, now after the death of Jehoiada, the prince of Judah came out to the wizards of the king, then the king hearkened to them. Verse 18 says, and they forsook the house of the Lord, the God of their fathers, and served the Asherim and the idols. And they answered the Asherim and the idols, and wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for this time. Verse 19 says, yet he sent the prophet among them. Among them to bring them back to the Lord. Yet this testified against them, but they did not give him. This testified against them, but they gave him. Verse 20 says, and then the spirit of God took possession of Zechariah. The congregation of Zechariah, son of Jehoiada, the priest, and he stood up with the people and said, thus says God, how will you transgress the commandments of the Lord, so that you cannot prosper? Why is the commandments of the Lord? How will you transgress the commandments of the Lord, so that you cannot prosper? Because I have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you. Because I have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you. Verse 21 says, and what? Verse 21 says, because I have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you. Verse 21 says, and verse 21 says, and they conspired against him. But they conspired against him, and by command of the king, they stoned him with stones in the court of the house of the Lord. Verse 22 says, thus Joash king, don't remember the kindness which Joram, Zechariah's father, had shown him, but killed his son. And when he was dying, he said, may the Lord see and avenge. Verse 23 says, at the end of the year, the army of the Syrians came up against Joash. They came to Judah and Jerusalem and destroyed the prince of the people among the people, and sent for their spoil to the king of Damascus. And so their spoil to the king of Damascus. As soon as the king of the person said, the army of the Syrians has come to free me. Lord deliver to hand. The very big army, because I was seeking the Lord, the God of their fathers. So there's a extent judgment of the one. As the Christ said, when I departed from him, leaving him severely wounded, his servant conspired against him, because of the blood of the son of Jehoiada, and slew him on his bed. And they buried him in the city of David, but they did not bury him in the city of the kings. Verse 25 says, those who conspired against him were Zabad, son of Shimon, the Ammonites. Zabad, son of Shimon, the Ammonites, and Jehoshaphat, son of Shimon, the Moabites. Verse 25 says, and the mirror was against him, and the building of the house of God are written in the commentary on the book of the Kings. 25 verse 1 says, verse 1. Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he made 25 years in Jerusalem. Okay, Amaziah is when he said, 25 verse 1 says, Amaziah was 25 years when he began to reign, and he made 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoiada of Jerusalem. And as soon as Jehoiada the power of famine in his hand, he killed his sons who had slain the king his father, according to what is written in the law. According to what is written in the law, in the book of Moses, what the Lord commanded, the father should not be put to death for children, or children put to death for the father. For every man shall die for his own sin. Verse 5 says, then Amaziah assembled the men of Judah and sell them my father's houses. Men of Judah, I sell them my father's houses. I sell my father's houses. With commanders of thousands and of hundreds, one of thousands and of hundreds, and of hundreds, 400 and most of those 20 years old and upward. I found that there were 300,000 people fit for war, go to another spell. As he said, he had also 100,000 mighty men of valor from Jerusalem, from Israel, for 100 talents of silver. As he said, but the man of God came and said to him, O king, do you know that they are not Israel, but the God is not Israel, who told these Israelites. As it says, but Amaziah said to him, but what shall we do about the 100 talents we shall give to the army of Israel? Man of God answered him, the Lord is able to give you much more than this. As it says, the Lord is able to give you much more than this. As it says, then Amaziah decided and country for Ephraim to go and became very angry. And they became very angry with Judah and went and turned on the Santa. As it says, but Amaziah had to courage and let that is but Amaziah had to courage and let that is and let that is but Amaziah had to courage and let that is and they went to the valley of Saul and slew 10,000 men. Men of Judah captured all that 10,000 alive and threw them on the top of the rock and threw them out on top of the rock, and they were all dashed to pieces. Verse 13 says, for the men of the army whom Amaziah had sent back, not letting them to go with him to battle, fell upon the cities of Judah from Samaria to Bethlehem and killed 3,000 people. And 3,000 people there. Verses 14 says, after Amaziah killed the Sultan of Ammon, he brought the gods and the men of Seth and set them upon his throne and worshiped them, making office to them. Verses 15 says, therefore the Lord was angry with Amaziah and said to him, the two said to him, why have you resorted to the gods of the people, which not divide their own people from your hand? Verse 16 says, but as I was speaking, the king said to him, have you made the ruler consider? Stop! Why should we put to death?
Verse 7 says, Solomon consecrated the middle of the court that was before the house of the Lord, for there he offered the burnt offering and the peace offering. For there he offered the burnt offering and the cereal offering and the fat. Verse 8 says,
Why should we not trouble so that you fall? So that you fall, you and Judah with you. You and Judah with you. Verse 10 says, but Amaziah will not listen, but it was of God. But Amaziah will not listen. But Amaziah will not listen, but it was of God, in order that he might give them to the hand of their enemies, for they have sought the God of Edom. Verse 21 says, so Joash king of Israel went up, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, faced, and Amaziah, king of Judah, this was another in battle at Bethshemesh, it belongs to Judah. Verse 22 says, and Judah was defeated by Israel, and every man fled to Israel. Verse 23 says, and Joash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, son of Joash, son of Ahaziah, at Bethshemesh, and brought him to Jerusalem, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem for 400 cubits, from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate. For 400 cubits, from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, and this, from Ephraim gate to the corner gate, that is the 24 says, and he sees all the gold and silver, and all the vessels, and he sees all the gold and vessels, all the vessels of the fast, I'll block them. I'll be done with them. Also, and he turned to Samaria. And he turned to Samaria. Verse 25 says, I turned to Samaria. Verse 25 says, Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, lived 15 years after the death of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. Verse 26 says, now the rest of the deeds of Amaziah and first rulers are written in a book. Of the kings of Israel and Judah. Verse 27 says, from the time when he turned away from the Lord, he made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But they sent after him to Lachish and slew him there. Verse 28 says, and he brought him upon horses. And he was buried with his father in the city of David.
Is it even? You are going like that. Listen now. Have you job apple today?
Then I will establish your royal throne. Verse 18 says, then I will establish your royal throne, and this house I will consecrate for my name. Verse 19 says, but if you turn away from me and go and serve other gods and worship them, then verse 20 says, then I will pluck you up from the land which I have given you. Then I will pluck you up from this land from the land which I have given you. And at this house which I have consecrated for my name, I will make a proverb and a byword to among all peoples. Verse 19 says, verse 21 says, and at this house which is exalted, everyone passing by will be astonished and say, why has the Lord done thus to this land and to this house? Verse 22 says, then they shall say, because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers. Therefore he has brought all this evil upon them. Chapter 8 verse 1 says, at the end of the 20 years which Solomon built the house of the Lord and his own house, verse 2 says, he rebuilt the cities which Huram gave to him and said to the people of Israel in them. Verse 3 says, he went to Hamath-Zobah and took it. Verse 4 says, he built Tadmor in the wilderness. He built Tadmor in the wilderness and all the store cities in the cities and all the cities which he had in Judah. Verse 5 says, he built upper Beth-horon and lower Beth-horon, fortified cities with walls and towers, gates and bars. Verse 6 says, verse 6 says, and Baalat and all the store cities which Solomon had, and whatever he desired to build in Lebanon, in the forest of the house of Lebanon, and in Jerusalem, and in all the land of his dominion. Verse 7. Verse 7 says, all the people who were left of the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, who were not of Israel. Verse 8, who were not of Israel. Verse 8 says, from the descendants of them who were left, whom the people of Israel did not destroy, this Solomon made a first levy, and so they are to this day. Verse 9 says, but of the people of Israel, Solomon made no slaves for his work. They were soldiers and officers of his army. Verse 10 says, these are Solomon's officers. 250 who exercise authority over the people. Verse 11 says, and he brought Pharaoh's daughter up from the city of David to the house which he had built for her. For he said, the place to which the ark of the Lord has come are holy. Verse 12 says, according to the ordinances of David his father, he appointed the priests he appointed the divisions of the priests and the Levites for their services. Verse 12 says, according to the ordinances of David his father, he appointed the divisions of the priests and the Levites for their services, to offer burnt offerings to the Lord morning and evening, as the duty of each day required, and the gatekeepers for the several gates of the house of the Lord. Verse 13 says, according to the law of Moses. Verse 13 says, according to the law of Moses, they offered. Verse 13 says, as the duty of each day required, according to the law of Moses, they offered burnt offering. They offered burnt offerings on the altar of the Lord, and the 3 annual feasts the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Feast of Tabernacles, and the Feast of Weeks. Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Weeks. Verse 14 says, according to the ordinances of David his father, he appointed the divisions of the priests. Verse 14 says, according to the ordinances of David his father, he appointed the divisions of the priests for their service, of the priests and the Levites for their service, as the duty of each day required, and the gatekeepers in their divisions for the several gates of the house of the Lord. Verse 15 says, and they did not turn aside from what the king commanded the priests and the Levites concerning the burnt offering and this, concerning the burnt offering and concerning the treasuries and all the matters. Verse 16 says, concerning the burnt offering and all the matters. Verse 16 says, he went, verse 16 says, verse 16, he went to, verse 16 says, verse 16 says, he went to Ezion-Geber and Elot on the shore of the sea in the land of Edom. Verse 17 says, and Huram sent him, verse 18 says, and Huram sent him by his servants, sheep and servants familiar with the sea, and they went together with the servants of Solomon to gold and brought it to the king. Chapter 9 verse 1 says, now when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to Jerusalem to test him with hard questions, having a very great retinue and camels bearing spices and precious stones. When she came to Jerusalem, she told him all that was in her heart. Verse 2 says, Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from him which he could not explain to her. Verse 3 says, and when the queen of Sheba saw the wisdom of Solomon and the house which he had built, verse 4 says, and the food of his table and the attendance of his servants and the sitting of his officials and their clothing, his cupbearers and their clothing, and the burnt offering which he offered in the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Verse 5 says, and she said to the king, the report was true, of which I heard in my own land of your affairs, about your affairs and of your wisdom. Verse 6 says, but I did not believe the report until I came, and my own eyes have seen it. Half of the greatness of your wisdom was not told me. Behold, you surpass the report which I. Verse 7 says, happy are your wives, happy are these your servants, who continually stand before you to hear your wisdom. Verse 8 says, because the Lord your God loved Israel and would establish them, he made you king over them, that you may execute justice and righteousness. Verse 9 says, and the queen of Sheba gave to Solomon. Verse 9 says, then she gave to the king 120 talents of gold and precious stones and spices. There were no such spices such as those which the queen of Sheba gave to Solomon. Verse 10 says, moreover, the servants of Huram and the servants, verse 10, moreover, the servants of and the servants of Solomon, who brought gold from Ophir, also brought precious stones, argon woods and precious stones. Verse 11 says, and the king made of the argon wood steps for the house of the Lord and the king's house, harps also and lights for the singers. There there was never seen the like of them before in the land of Judah. Verse 12 says, and the king gave to the and King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all that she desired, whatever she asked, besides what she had brought to the king. So she went to her own land together with her servants. Verse 13 says, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Verse 14 says, besides that which the traders and merchants brought to the king, the governors, the kings of the Arabs and the governors of the land also brought presents to Solomon, gold, silver, precious stones. Verse 15 says, and Solomon made 200, verse 15 says, and Solomon made 200 large sheets of beaten gold, and 600 shekels of beaten gold went into each sheep. Verse 16 says, and he made 300 sheets of beaten gold, and 300 shekels of gold went into each sheep. Verse 17 says, then the king made an ivory throne. Then the king made a great ivory throne and overlaid it with gold. Verse 18 says, and he made steps. Verse 18 says, and he made steps. Verse 18 says, and he made golden footstools which were attached to the throne, and 12 lions stood on each end of the step. Verse 19 says, and 2 lions stood on each end of the step. Verse 19 says, while 12 lions stood there, 1 on the end of each step. The like of each was never in any kingdom. Verse 20 says, all King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold. The house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. Silver was not considered as anything in Jerusalem in the days of Solomon. Verse 21 says, so the king, verse 21 says, thus King Solomon excelled all the king of the earth in riches and in wisdom. Verse 22 says, verse 21 says, thus the house of the Lord was completed, and all that Solomon desired to do in the house of the Lord is successfully accomplished. Verse 22 says, thus King Solomon excelled all the kings in riches and in wisdom. In riches and in wisdom. And all the kings, verse 20, and all the kings sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom which God has put in his mind. Verse 23 says, every one of them used to come bringing his presents, articles of gold, silver, precious stones, articles of gold, silver, wood, precious stones, horses and mules, so much year by year. Verse 25, verse 24 says, and King Solomon reigned over all the kings of the earth, from the land of the Philistines to the border, to the land of the border of Egypt. Verse 25 says, and Solomon had 4,000 stalls for chariots and horses, and he had 12,000 horses whom he shone in the chariot cities and with the king in Jerusalem. Verse 26 says, and the king, verse 26 says, verse 26 says, and the king made silver and gold. Verse 26 says, and the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone, and cedar as plentiful as the sycamore of the Shephelah. Verse 27 says, and the kings, verse 27 says, horses were imported for Solomon from Egypt and from all lands. Verse 28 says, through them, verse 28 says, and all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Syria received them 9. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, from first to last, are they not written in the history of? Are they not written in the chronicles of Shemaiah the prophet, and in the history of Ahijah the Shilonite, and of Iddo the seer concerning Jeroboam the son of Nebat? Verse 30 says, and Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel for 40 years. Verse 31 says, and Solomon slept with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Rehoboam his son reigned instead. Chapter 10 verse 1 says, Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Verse 2 says, and when Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard of it, for he was in Egypt, whither he had fled from King Solomon, he returned from Egypt. Verse 3 says, and they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all the people of Israel came and said to Rehoboam. Verse 4 says, your father made our yokes heavy. Now therefore, lighten the heavy yoke that your father put upon us, and his hard service upon us, and we will serve you. Verse 5 says, he said to them, come to me again in 3 days. So the people went away. Verse 6 says, and Rehoboam took counsel from the old men who stood with Solomon his father while he was yet alive, and said to them, how do you advise me to answer these people? Verse 7 says, and the old men who had stood before Solomon his father said to him, if you will be kind to these people and please them and speak good words to them, they will be your servants forever. Verse 8 says, but he forsook the counsel which the old men gave him, and took counsel from the young men who had gone with him, and stood up with him, and said to them, what do you advise that we answer these people who have said to me? Verse 9 says, I said to them, what do you advise that we answer these people who have said to me? Your father put a heavy yoke upon us, but now therefore lighten the heavy yoke that your father put upon us. Lighten the heavy yoke that your father put upon us. Verse 9 says, and the men who had grown up our yoke heavy, but do you lighten it for us? Thus shall you speak. Verse 10 says, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. And now, verse 10 says, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. Verse 11 says, and now whereas my father put a heavy yoke upon you, I will add to it. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Verse 12 says, so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king had said, come to me again the third day. Verse 13 says, and the king answered them harshly, and forsaking counsel which the old men gave him. Verse 14, and he spoke to them according to the counsel which the young men gave to him, and said to them, my father put a heavy yoke upon you, but I will add to it. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpion. Verse 15 says, when the people saw that the king, verse 15 says, so the king did not hearken to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought by God, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Which he spoke to Ahijah the Shilonite, which he spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Verse 16 says, when the people saw that the king did not hearken to them, they answered the king, what portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every one of you to your tents, O Israel. Look now at your own house, David. So the people of Israel departed to their tents. Verse 17 says, but Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who were in Judah, who were in the cities of Judah. Verse 18 says, then the king sent Hadoram, who was taskmaster over the forced labor, and the people of Israel stoned him to death with stones. And the king made haste to mount up his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. Verse 19 says, 19 the last verse. So Israel had been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Should I do chapter 11?
They are making too much noise.